my name is Amanda and I'm the Education Coordinator here at the Pearl. Today we're going to be looking at oyster reef organisms. So we know that oysters are a very important part of the Chesapeake Bay, but they also house a lot of different organisms. And so today we're going to be looking at some of the creatures we pulled up from our oyster cages along St. Leonard Creek.
Oyster reefs generally form as shells fuse together as they grow, forming rock-like reefs that provide habitat for other animals and plants. But like I said, today we're going to be looking at one of our oyster cages, which can act like an oyster reef and can attract the same organisms that we generally find in oyster reefs. Our oyster cages along the Pearl Dock, like this one, are filled with oysters that will be used by Dr. Ming Liu for his genetics research or used in our oyster hatchery for spawning. Like with boats and docks that remain in the water for extended periods, these oyster cages have some biofouling on them. Biofouling refers to the accumulation of animals and algae onto aquatic surfaces. In these oyster cages, if the biofouling becomes too severe, it can affect the water flow in the cages and the oyster's ability to filter water. While oysters are known for their ability to filter algae out of the water, larger species of algae, such as this macroalgae, can also affect the water flow in these cages and can affect the health of the oysters inside the cage. So let's talk about the primary animal who lives in an oyster reef, an oyster. This is a live oyster, as you can tell by the tightly closed shell. There are a few friends growing on his shell, such as these barnacles here and here, as well as other creatures like a mussel, like this one. Both are important filter feeders who, like the oyster, can filter bay water. They don't affect the health of an oyster, rather they make their homes on oyster reefs due to the stability of the oyster reef and the amount of organisms that live there. Another organism that likes to live on oyster shells is a lacy crust bryozoan, like we see here. Bryozoans are aquatic organisms that live in colonies of interconnected individuals. Anywhere from a few to millions of individual bryozoans may be found living together. They eat food particles like bacteria and plankton by extracting them from the water using their lophophore. A lophophore is a ring of ciliated tentacles that protrudes from the internal living portion to feed. They can also absorb organic nutrients through their epidermis or skin. This shell is from a hooked mussel. These mussels attach themselves to surfaces such as oyster reefs using strong thread-like strands. Hooked mussels are great filter feeders and may double the overall filtering capacity of an oyster reef. The little creature swimming in my hand is an amphipod. Amphipods are very small, usually no larger than a fingertip, although some marine amphipods may reach up to 13 inches long. To date, there are over 9,000 species of amphipods identified, although only a fraction of those live in the Chesapeake Bay. They are a type of crustacean and a very important food source for small and young fish in the bay. This little guy is a mud crab. Mud crabs live along oyster reefs or in muddy bottoms of marshes. They can use their claws to crack open shells or to catch worms, fish, or other crabs. This one is missing one of his big claws, which he might have done to escape a predator, but it will grow back in a few months. Here is another mud crab, except this one is a white-fingered mud crab. If you look carefully, you can see the white tips on his claws. Mud crabs like to hide in oyster reefs, as you can tell by how he's trying to find any little crevice to hide in, like in between my fingers. This is a skilletfish. They're called skilletfish because of their pan-shaped bodies. They can generally grow to be about 3 inches in length, so this one is likely a mature adult. They can often be found in oyster reefs or in seagrass beds throughout the bay. They can be different colors, varying from pale gray to dark brown, with sort of a speckled pattern. Skilletfish can use a suction disc on their underside to cling to rocks or shells or to the side of the tank here. This is a blenny. Blennies often hide in oyster reefs to avoid predators, which are generally larger fish. In oyster reefs, blennies often feed upon small mollusks and crustaceans. They're very abundant throughout the bay, but they are also solitary and a bit secretive, so you don't always see them, especially when they hide in oyster reefs. This is a goby. There are several different species of goby that live in the Chesapeake Bay. They have similar patterns and habits to those of other fish in the oyster reef. They're very abundant but not always found. They're secretive, like the blenny. They also eat worms and small crustaceans that they find in the oyster reef. And like other fish, they like to hide in crevices of the oyster reefs from predators such as larger fish. Once we finished identifying and looking at all of our oyster reef organisms, we released them back into St. Leonard Creek. Here, John, our facilities manager, is helping us put the oyster cages back in the creek as well.
Good little oysters. Thank you for joining us today as we looked at some oyster reef organisms. We'll be back soon with more videos, so check out our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube for more videos in the future. Thank you!